This is really fun. I do want to kind of set this up a little bit for anyone that's watching. I know that people that, if anybody has followed some of my podcasts or some of the things that I have going on, like as an actor or performer, it's inevitable that they're going to smash into me talking about books because that's just a big part of my hobbies and interests. And Keith, I just want people to know, like, you and I are in the Twin Cities. We're both actors.
Yes.
And I feel like your name, Keith Russell, I feel like I've heard of it. I think we probably have mutual acquaintances.
Oh, I'm sure we do.
Yeah.
It's a small community here.
It is
and so even if,
yeah.
even if I haven't worked with you or even if I haven't seen you, we know people in common because that's just the type of community it is, which is what I love about the Twin Cities.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because even in like I always say, oh, the Twin Cities is small, but I've noticed that even in other markets, like when I've done some stuff like in LA, I'm like, oh, this is really, everybody knows everybody, or similar to what I'm just like, gosh, it's fun. It's super fun. But why I'm mentioning all of that for everybody is you and I have not like physically or virtually ever met before in this context. Nope. And I put out a thing the other day about, I was like, here's some books I'm reading. I'd love to like have a virtual book chat, book club, if you would. And I loved it because you reached out and you're like, I'm game. And there's something to that I so admire and I love. So welcome. And
thank you.
Do you want to mention what book we're going to chat about today?
I do. And just as a quick sidebar, so I do burlesque, as you know, and some people also may know by looking at me that I do burlesque. My tagline for my burlesque character is up for anything and always eager to say yes.
Up for everything and I'm trying to eager to say yes. That's a dangerous
willing to say yes, but eager. It is. But it's one of those like, hey, I'm game for anything. I may say no, but I want to say yes.
I want to say no, but I want to say yes. Yes.
Exactly. So
that's fun.
I try and live that in life as well. So like, I saw your post. I'm like, sure, why not? I've never done anything like this. I haven't read the book, but I'm really curious. And it's been on my list. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And the book we are talking about is The Year of Living Biblically by A.J. Jacobs.
Dun, dun, dun. I'm going to change the speaker view. Yes.
It's been on when I first heard about it, I kind of mentally checked it off. Like that's a book I want to read at some point. And I never got around to it. So once you posted, I'm like, oh.
Yeah. No, I hear.
Gives me a reason to do it.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. Which is, I have it as well. Da, da, da.
Ooh, hardcover. Nice.
Hardcover. Yeah. Yeah. When I saw it, I was like, I'm very curious. And I think a lot of people have been, because I don't know. I think I had posted something on Facebook or something on social media about the book, or I don't remember what I said, but I got a few comments from people that are like, oh, I read that. It was really good. It was interesting. I think that was actually before I had actually read it too. So it was one of those things that kind of spurred it on. But I am curious, Keith, if we both can just kind of give our, I don't know, how would you describe this book to someone? And then what did you think in like that star review, like 1 to 5?
So I just posted it on Goodreads yesterday once I finished it, because that's my platform at the moment.
Nice.
5 stars. Good, like read, which when you approach a subject like this, there's a fear of it getting a really detailed and too literate, I don't know what. I like a book that's an easy read when it's talking about a difficult subject.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. Yeah.
I have a lot of books on music, which I love music and theater, but there are some books that are just, going note by note and breaking down what this note means and why it's this chord, the specific chord. I'm like, that's interesting. Yes. I find it fascinating, but it took me longer to read the book because of that. This was not that case. And I found it really easily, like really readable, which I appreciate.
Yeah. Totally echo that.
Yeah.
So you gave it a 5-star review. That's fantastic.
I'm also easy with my reviews.
Yeah, no,
That's kind of what it comes down to.
I'm actually kind of in that space. I think like I haven't quite done enough book reviews, and I haven't quite done enough book reviews to like know quite where my star ratings are at, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah.
Like
Oh yeah.
you mentioned Goodreads and stuff. So I'm very familiar with Goodreads. I've read a ton of reviews on there, but I haven't ever written one per se.
Ah.
So I'm in that space where I'm like, what do my star ratings mean? Um, so before I give my star rating, I actually would say that I too really found the book to be easy to read. Um, which isn't totally shocking or surprising, I suppose. Like I did look around a little bit and I was like, oh, like AJ Jacobs, the author, he writes a lot for Esquire magazine. I think he actually might
Right.
even be the managing editor at the moment. So he writes a ton of like magazine stuff, and I feel like that sort of style of writing, especially with like an Esquire or something, it would have to be very approachable. So I can sort of see that
That
reflected
makes
in
sense.
this. Yeah. Um, there are things I want to dive in deeper too. We will get to those. Before I do that though, I would have to say that I would give this a solid. I would give it like a gosh, I'm like on waffling on a 3.5 stars to 4 stars. I can't say 5 because I was like, I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't like I wasn't like, I love this. You know what I mean? Um
True.
and
Yeah.
I'll share some reasons why. I think later we'll dive into some of that when I'm giving it a more of a critique. But I
Good.
did really enjoy it, and I think I don't know that it's for. I feel like I'd be really curious to have somebody read this that is um maybe agnostic or something, because I feel like he came from that perspective a little bit.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know, I'd be curious to kind of hear from that perspective. um I think we should go here actually, Keith.
Well,
um
here's a question. Do you come from a faith background?
I do. That was my question. Yeah, so
And
you're
as do I. I mean,
mhm. And
which is
I
my parents are missionaries, and so I grew up like most of my schooling was in Christian schools.
mhm.
Have I read the whole Bible? No, I've not. Was I supposed to at some point in my life? Sure, I certainly was,
Yeah.
but no. To the point where after having Bible class every year from third grade all the way till senior in my school, and then 4 years in college of Bible, 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 I got to the point where I was like, I just need to take a break. And so
Right.
I've been on a break,
Right.
but it's so at least with the faith is still there. That's a whole different subject. Um, but I found it interesting to see, okay, how does somebody else interpret the Bible? What's another viewpoint? Which is what kind of
Yes.
drew me to this as well.
I love that. I love that because I have a very similar. I almost wonder if it's like a Midwestern life experience in a way too, because I have a very similar experience to yours, where I'm like, yeah, raised in, I can't remember a time ever that my parents and stuff where we weren't attending church. Um, my dad, he was missionary-esque. Like he wasn't a missionary like in a permanent setting, but we would take mission trips and stuff, like through church and things like that. So um yeah, definitely. I don't know if I have ever read the incomplete. I don't know if I've ever done that either, like read the Bible from beginning to end, but I feel like I would be really hard pressed to find any part of the Bible that I've not heard about. um so I
Exactly.
I
Yes.
was
Yeah.
yeah, I was very curious to read this from that perspective too, because I was like, where is this going to go? And actually, I was a little bit skeptical at first when he first started the book, because I was just like, huh. Um, I feel like I probably should set this up a little bit. Like, so the year of living biblically, one man's humble quest to follow the Bible as literally as possible. Uh, and when I hear that, I chuckle because I know, and I'm assuming you do too, Keith, living this literally could be really.
Problematic in a lot of ways. Yes.
What are some of the ways why? Like, I know he covers them in the book too.
Well, first off, it comes down to clothing, not wearing mixed fabrics. There's that right away. There's
Yes.
the whole diet, specifically if you're looking at the Old Testament, you're looking at the whole dietary laws. You're looking at laws of, and he brings this up, of not being around or touching women after their period, adultery, like things like that, where in a day-to-day
Yeah.
life, it's difficult. There's a lot of, you can't, it's a difficult thing. At least I think pre-COVID.
Well, and even
Now,
that's funny. Yeah.
I was going to say post-pandemic, you're not really touching people. So there's not really that type of concern. At least I don't find myself doing that.
There's
So
no, I'm chuckling just with that a little bit too, because there is that I don't know though, like he specifically says in here too, and it was one of the parts of the book that I found probably one of the most humorous was the part about not being able to touch his wife when she was menstruating. And I belly laughed when he was describing what his wife did and how she was so
yeah.
Spoiler alert. I mean, we're gonna talk about a lot of stuff, but she was menstruating, and apparently like it's to the point where, in addition to like you aren't able to touch your wife, you can't like sit on a chair that she has sat on. And in the book, I just love this so much, she sat in every chair in their apartment, so he couldn't sit down anywhere. I think he found like a little kid's chair or something like that to sit on, which I think is funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think he said that he had like bought something online that he could sit and carry it with him, and always have his seat in cases like that. Because even on the trains and subways in New York, he wouldn't be able to sit or touch anything.
Well, you just don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And that raises that really interesting question too, where it's like, is it a sin if you didn't know? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, here's what my life is, that from what I've heard, at least with the Catholic faith, because I'm not Catholic, but in the Catholic faith, if you take communion and you're not Catholic, yeah, it's a sin, but it's also a sin for the priest to give it to you, even if he doesn't know.
Interesting. Okay. Huh.
And I could be off base on that, but that's kind of what I was told through the grapevine. I was like,
yeah,
how is it a sin for him?
Yeah. No, it's interesting.
No, I get that it'd be a sin for me, but yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of if you get pulled over for like a speeding ticket or something, and you're like, oh, officer, I didn't know. And they're like, well, not knowing doesn't mean it's not breaking the law. I'm like, okay.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me chuckle. I guess for myself, Keith, and for anyone listening, like, I personally don't feel like I was necessarily challenged by anything that he wrote. And that was something I was curious about. Like when I first picked it up, I was like, I don't know where he's going to go with this. But after reading it and stuff, it, like we kind of touched on, is it's very approachable. But I didn't read it and think like this is confronting and challenging like my personal faith. Like I totally still have faith like you do as well. But I don't know, like I was chatting with a sister of mine, and I don't know, she seemed extremely skeptical, where she was just like, I don't know. And I was like, this isn't that challenging. He's exploring. I don't know. It was interesting.
Here's what I was surprised about. I assumed before reading it that he was somebody who had no faith background at all, and just on a whim. And then to find out he actually comes from a Jewish background, but not really firmly believing. I'm like, okay, well, you already have it into this. Like you already have some of the background, so you know what this is about, what you're getting yourself into. I think it'd be really interesting to have a viewpoint of somebody who has no faith background and tries to do this and tries to do that journey. I think that'd be a completely different story. Yes. And I think that might end up being a little bit more confrontational, because they don't have as much, I'm going to use the term belief, which is not accurate. It's not the right term, but they don't have as much going into it. They don't have as much context within their life to know where these rules are coming from. So there'd be more, and therefore it might make them more angry, more like, oh no, this is not worth doing. Whereas reading this, I felt, yeah, it's a really interesting challenge. But like you said, didn't feel confronted. I didn't feel
Right.
like, oh, I'm
Right.
not doing my life, I'm not living my life correctly. None of that.
Yeah. No, I thought that his
I'm like, oh,
take.
what you need to do. Yeah.
Mhm. I agree totally. Like I think I kind of I think I had that same perspective before I picked it up. I was kind of
Mhm.
thinking that it was I did not know that I didn't know that he was Jewish. And so I was like, oh, okay. And I really appreciated the fact that because of that, I'm assuming because of that, he really focused on like the Jewish tradition,
Yeah.
and the Torah way, way, way more than I thought. Like when I again, assumptions, right? Can be
Yeah.
so wrong because he's focused on the Jewish perspective and on the Torah. And I don't think that he really dove into the like Christian biblical version view of the Bible until it almost felt like it was like 3/4 of the way through.
Yeah. Like the last 2 months, maybe, were about the New Testament and Jesus and that sort of background.
Hmm.
Whereas everything before that was definitely Old Testament, Torah, Moses, the Levitical laws, all of that, which makes sense because of his background.
Yeah,
I also
yeah.
think that, at least coming from my background, I also think that that is where you're going to find most of the laws and the rules. If you read the New Testament, you don't really see that much of that.
Yep. There was I appreciate what you're saying. There's a explanation and he did it really, really well. And I just had not heard it before, or I had never paid attention if somebody had ever said it. But he was talking about like the differences between um like the Old Testament, New Testament, and like what Christianity and Christians pull from the
Mhm.
Old Testament. And he's gosh, I'm gonna probably kill this and not do it justice how how he explained it. But he's like basically Christians take the moral guidance, but they leave the really strict, like you must not turn on a light, those really strict things that are based
Right.
on there isn't necessarily potentially a moral piece to it.
Yeah.
And
The kind of the practical laws, it
yeah,
seems.
yeah, yeah. And I just hadn't really because I had never really understood that. I was just like, so we kind of take some, we kind of don't as so I guess I really did learn that little tidbit. Um, would you recommend this to I actually kind of already know that from what you said and what I said. I would recommend this to people.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I would totally
Um,
recommend it. I actually have a nephew who's in Bible school right now, and I'm thinking it's gonna end up under the tree for him, because I think he'll find it really interesting. Just knowing his perspective, he may find it really intriguing to read this.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's super fun. And that's yeah, yeah. I wonder there's a part of me that's like, all right, so let me know when he reads it and we all can talk more. Um, I actually have, I told you about these. Like I have so many like questions and things like that. So I'm actually just going to pick one at random and ask it to you.
Yeah. Bring it. Let's do this.
Um, did you find the author's story compelling?
I did, because it's a journey, and I find journey stories to be really interesting. And they, for the most part, they start, and you want to see where this character ends up. You want to see how his journey is changing who he is, or if it is changing who he is, or if it's just a journey and he's going to be
Mhm.
done, and end of it, we're back to my usual life. And I find
Right.
it interesting that after this year, that for the most part he was back to his usual life, except there were a few changes. Like he talks about being more grateful, and he I don't even yeah, I just finished it yesterday. I should know this, but I don't think he really talked about anything that was going to linger. It was a good experience, and he learned some things, but he was also kind of on to his next thing. You know,
Yeah. I'm going to share this too. I have I on that note of like, what did he learn from this experience? Um,
Mhm.
and like what habits maybe kind of stuck. This book was written, if I'm not mistaken, 2007, I believe 2007 or 2008. And I was really fortunate because AJ Jacobs actually, I did an interview with him and it's coming out in next week.
Oh, very cool.
So I was able to chat with him and I asked him sort of a similar question. I'm not going to answer it here. I'll let people wait, wait and hear, but it goes along with what you're saying, Keith, which is um, like 2008. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to do math. This is super easy. What was that, like 12 years ago, 13 years ago? Um,
Sure.
no, two,
I'm a theater
yeah,
person. I don't do
yeah,
math.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh my gosh, I sound really, really, really smart. Um, but like having done like an experiment like this 12, 13 years ago, what stuck, what didn't stick?
Yeah.
Because I really got that vibe too, where it was just like, okay, this and that sort of a thing, like approaching this as an experiment, I think was even where I was like, where is he going to go with this? And like, what is this perspective? And is he going to learn anything? Um, yeah, yeah,
Well, one
I,
thing I thought was interesting, if I can jump in, is
please
that
do.
it the style is very much diary. It's very much it's what I did. It's my experience on this day as I'm following this. These are the rules I'm following. So there's kind of that diary aspect to it without much reflection. So it would be really interesting now to read it again or to have an afterword where he reflects back. That was my journey then. Here, 5 years later, I'm realizing that these are the things that I still practice on a daily basis. Or this was a really interesting time that I went through. None of it really applies to my life at this moment. But I'm glad I went through the experience. It'd be really interesting to
Yeah,
know that aspect. Because
yeah,
obviously when you're doing that for a year, you can't write a book and then be done and be like, yep, okay, I've learned everything. And you don't really have that time frame to look back and experience and go, ah, hey, I'm still doing this thing. I'm still being grateful every day. I'm grateful for the chair I sit in. I'm grateful for this. You don't really recognize that until I think.
hmm.
And I'm sure your interview with him will probably touch base with that.
I'm only smiling because I'm like, he
Yeah.
he. No, I like why I'm smiling too is because I'm like, oh, Keith, you're smart. Ding, ding, ding. And I wasn't familiar with like a lot of his other books at all. Like this was
Mhm.
the first book by him that I ever had read. So maybe a little bit of a teaser to kind of what you're saying is he wrote another book, and actually I think it came out a couple of years ago, but it was um oh gosh, I'm totally going to forget the name of it. It's like it's not the year of gratitude, but it's related to gratitude. So
Ah,
there is you get it, right?
yeah.
there's
Yeah, I
there's
get it. I see
there's
where this is going.
yeah, you get it. Yeah. So yeah, yeah. I found I don't need to even answer this question because I did find it compelling. Yeah. Um this one's fun. If
And I'm
you're
also intrigued to read his first book.
the which one was it? Because
Like I want to read about going through reading. Like his first book is all about him reading the encyclopedia A to Z, and I'm like, that sounds really fascinating.
it sounds like it could be really fascinating or really boring because I
True. Yes. There's.
I'm assuming that it's probably not boring because I think that he's pretty fairly engaging as a writer.
Yeah.
Um I have to share this though. Oh my gosh. And I'm only chuckling because I'm like, when you put things out into the internet, it's like, yeah, that's good. I have an ex-boyfriend who when I was reading this, Keith, I
Mm-hmm.
was like, hmm. I was very much reminded of my ex-boyfriend. My ex-boyfriend was Jewish and he was an
Okay.
author. of a well-known book. And I'm not going to say any more than that on that topic, other than the fact that I couldn't get over the fact that, like, I was like, oh, good grief. Like, I wish I almost didn't have that sort of a mental, like, mentally, I was like, oh, this reminds me so much of my ex. The style, a little bit of
Mhm.
the writing. And also there was something with, I I don't know if you got this impression, but I did, and it's a little bit of a critique and it's a little bit of a personality thing. But like when you said that AJ Jacobs wrote this kind of as a diary, and there wasn't maybe
Yeah.
necessarily a lot of reflection within the writing, um, I really picked up on that because it reminds me of my ex, who actually was a slight narcissist. So I couldn't get that out of my head. So I'm not 100% sure. Like, I, there's something to this where I was finding myself, I was like, oh my gosh, like, some of the characters and people that AJ met, I
Mhm.
was like, oh, I wish there was a little bit more about them.
Yeah. Okay. I see that.
Yeah. Um, and it's a little bit of that piece where I don't know. I get that it's the year of living biblically and it's like one man's humble quest. So I mean that's in the title. So I guess I can't be too picky. Um, I don't know. Yeah, there was just something in it where I was like, gosh, some of these other people are wildly interesting and you're only talking about yourself.
Yes. But he has if I remember correctly, has a pretty good bibliography in the back. Interesting, like links to the kind of some of the people he talked to. Um, I'm trying, or maybe it's not the index. Why am I going through the index here?
I'm going through the index as well. And I actually did not look at that piece, but there is, his index is quite big, actually. He has a big bibliography, Bible bibliography. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, the bibliography. And I have not gone through and reviewed all of that. Um,
But
yeah,
what I
yeah.
appreciated is that he actually there's it took me a couple days. Like I was probably about halfway through when I realized that there's a notes section where I didn't realize that he was providing notes to some of the things he was talking about. So, he talks about how on day one, or the introduction, like talks a little bit more about his preparation, and day two he talks about certain things that he writes about, and then reflects back and says, oh, by the way, this is where I got this information. Here's a link to this site if you want to dive into more of what this means.
Where
And I
is
was like,
that?
well,
Is
that's
that in
really
the
cool.
back? Oh, it is in here. Here's the thing.
It is in the back, yeah. So I would like finish a couple chapters, couple months, because he writes it in every month is a chapter, sort of. I'd
And
finish a
then
couple chapters and then go back and go, all right, what am I missing? Is there any information? Oh, that's an interesting link. Okay, I should check. Oh, okay, cool.
I have to say, in full transparency, I never ever came across that piece in here, and I feel like I'm totally missing out on it. So I love that you're mentioning that, because of the fact that I bounced between the book and the audiobook. Like I actually
Ah, okay,
listened to a lot of it on the audiobook, and then I would jump in. But I don't believe they touched on the notes at all in the audio version, which
interesting.
is a weird thing because I would think that in my experience with audiobooks is they generally do everything. So that's a little odd to me. I'm not exactly sure
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you would do that within that, but yeah, that's awesome. So maybe I can go back and read parts of that and I'll change my perspective a little bit on him being a narcissistic person like my ex.
Maybe. The other thing I found really interesting about this and my history is that he mentions a pastor from the Twin Cities, who I actually know and took classes from when I was in college.
Oh,
And I was
really?
like, oh, Greg Boyd is in this book. Well, that's cool. And it's just one of those weird, like, I know this name. I know this guy in person. That's fascinating that they connected, and that I now know a little bit more about Greg's story because he talks a little bit about what he did.
Right. Right. Right.
And
Right.
it's kind of towards the end when he's talking about religion and politics, and how some of the bigger mega churches have become more political and right versus conservatives, and how it's a thing and you should read the book.
Yeah.
Read the book to
Yeah.
read about it. But he mentions Reverend Greg Boyd. I was like, I know who that is.
Which
So
is
I always
always super
a
fun.
fun thing. Yeah.
Yeah. This is I just finished reading. Have you, this is not about this book specifically, but have you ever read or heard of Preachers and Sneakers? It's an
I've
Insta
not.
it's an Instagram account, and it's newish to me. I'm not that cool. Um, but there's this Instagram account called Preachers and Sneakers, and the idea behind it, and the gentleman, he will post things about like big mega churches or people that are in ministry or in the Christian church, who he'll take like pictures of their sneakers and post how much they cost. And um
Oh,
yeah, and it became a really big deal, and it's become a thing. But so he wrote an entire book called Preachers and Sneakers, and I just finished it, and I really liked it. I enjoyed it a lot. But it kind of touches on that whole concept and that whole idea of like mega churches and like what they are, and like questioning like their place within Christianity, and like I don't know, this book doesn't touch on that, but what you're talking about with the mega churches and kind of their purpose and conservatism and politics and all blah 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 blah. Yeah, I mentioned it, it might be something to that I would be curious to talk with somebody about. If you're ever curious to read Preachers and Sneakers, let me know.
I think this book does touch on that though briefly, because he does go down to Falwell. He has those experiences, but it's told through his eyes. It's told through his rules. You know where he's at in following the rules. So it's not delved into, but he does at least touch on the subject of the religious right and the mega churches, and how do you navigate your way through that, and how do they navigate their way through the laws, which I found an interesting thing. I think it's something you could dive deeper into at some point, or somebody could.
Right. You finished this yesterday. I finished this a
Yes.
few months back, and my memory is wonderfully short in some ways, because you're 100% right. They're um what's the word? Extremism. He touches on extremism quite a bit towards the end, if I'm
Yeah, yeah.
remembering. Those extreme um Jerry Falwell, or forgive me if I'm mixing some of that up, but I know that he mentioned like even like there's these factions of um end of the world sort of revelation people
Mhm.
within Christianity, where they're trying to make the end of the world happen according to Revelation, and some of the extreme beliefs and things that they're literally doing to make that happen.
Yeah.
um but I love too that he paired that up with like the other version of like Revelation, where it's just like, oh, maybe this was code and it didn't happen, and it won't I don't know, maybe it's less of a prophecy and more of like a coded letter of what was I don't know. It was interesting how he was pairing up
Mhm.
extremism, and I'm thinking that that was the section you're talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
To some extent, Falwell was earlier, but towards the end, he does talk about that when he comes to the New Testament, because he's also talking about the snake handling and um, version of faith, and yet it's kind of marked in, well, it's in the Old Testament, but New Testament, there's some of that where he talks about, the New Testament is talking mainly about giving up your wealth and being poor and giving stuff away. How does that fit in with what's happening now with the mega churches? Kind of
Right.
that aspect.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is making me want to give this book to my to my a lot of people, family, friends, because actually I forgot a little bit of some of those pieces. That's really things that make you go, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
You're about to pull out another question.
I was about to pull out another question. There's a whole bunch of them here, actually. Um, we answered this one. Did the plot move along? How controversial are the issues in the book?
I don't, honestly, I don't, the way he writes about it, I didn't find anything to be controversial. Like some of the things he wrote about were a struggle for him, but I don't think, but he also makes it very clear that there are a lot of different ways to read this. This is just my interpretation of how I'm dealing with it. So it seemed like there's really not much controversy to what he wrote. He did bring up a really interesting thing about translations between miscarriage and like how it fits into the abortion and pro-life, pro-choice issue briefly. But
Remind me
beyond
of
that seems to me
remind
like
me
the
of that.
only.
Remind me of what was that comparison? Because I
Oh,
vaguely remember it. If you remember, no worries if not.
it came to be a translation between Exodus 21:22, day 314, if you want to follow along.
Yeah.
About how there's a Hebrew word for losing her offspring, which a lot of people translate as miscarriage, but it can also be translated as premature birth.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like different websites that deal with how abortion and the Bible, how actually the Bible kind of, from his view, allows for both sides to use it, which I found to be really interesting, because obviously the Bible, growing up gay, the Bible can be used to pretty much say whatever you want to say, depending on where you're studying from and where you're pulling from. But I thought that was probably the most controversial thing he brought up, really, was abortion, how it can be used in different ways. He didn't really talk on, and if you think of the Bible, you think of the controversial views in this day and age, where you think about being gay or abortion or wealth. And he kind of touched a bit on wealth when it comes to the mega churches and different aspects of how to but in abortion, and he didn't really talk on homosexuality much at all, because
Right.
as he said,
Right.
it can depend on translation, it can depend on where you're coming from, like what background you have, if you're strict Jewish or not. He wrote it lazy, as he said, he writes for Esquire, so he wrote it in a very palatable way that no one will really be offended by.
Right.
But he also provides enough information that you can really dig into it on your own if you want.
Mm-hmm.
Which I appreciated that.
I appreciated that as well. Well, and I like too, like he gave enough for me. He gave enough of his own like opinion too, where I didn't feel like he was just, you know what I mean? Like he definitely gave his opinion, on those topics like abortion and homosexuality and just different things like that. I thought it was interesting. I should have asked him this question, but it wasn't something that he got into, and he just didn't really, other than just saying like, yeah, that's something that I wouldn't really. I think in the book he's just like, yeah, I don't agree with that, or
Yeah.
yeah, like that's not the take I would have in my life. I felt like in general too, like his perspective is very, he does this in the book, but it's very fatherly in a way. But he is in the book, he's actually a father. He's becoming a father. And
Right.
I feel like navigating some of these topics and things too. It's like, here's some facts, and I'll kind of tell you a little bit, but you have to make up your mind in your own way.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
I appreciate, and I think that's part of what makes it so, because he's not diving into the heavy subjects. He's like, here's my viewpoint, here's my journey, here's where I'm at here right now as I'm writing this. Figure it out yourself. Looking back, I realized that it is very much a straight white cisgender, not white gendered viewpoint. And I think that if somebody else were to read this, or not read this, but do the same process, it would be a very different book.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like he owns that, like, very much. Yeah. Where
Exactly.
he's just like, this is coming from my perspective and my experience. Because going back to like his wife's experience, like it was a very, very different experience for her than him. Yeah. 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 I think I'm just looking at the clock too. Should we do one more of these questions?
Sure.
Unless there's something, unless you have a question too, like shout one out if you've got one.
I
Um,
don't.
I actually have an answer for this, but I'm curious to hear yours and then I'll share mine. If you had to choose one lesson only that the author was trying to teach, what would it be?
I was actually thinking about this because towards the end of the book, he talks about how he has realized that he prays, or at least is very grateful and does a lot of gratitude on,
Mhm.
which I think is really important. But I just finished reading Marie Kondo's book about sparking joy, because I have a lot, as you can see from my background, I have a lot of stuff in my house that I'm figuring out what do I need to maintain? What do I need to keep? What am I hanging on to that I'm just hanging on to for no reason? And one thing Marie Kondo brings up is, as you're getting rid of stuff, to take a moment and say, thank you for your moment in my life. Thank you for this
Mhm.
book. Thank you for, like, her point a lot of times is to say thank you internally for everything. So you get out of the car at work. Thanks for getting me here safely. Thanks for the road. Thanks. And as I thought, I was doing that for a while, and it's a really different perspective, and it does look on things. Um, it's a There's a theory of, you choose to be happy, which I think, yes, sort of. You definitely choose your reaction to things, but having that constant thought of gratitude in there is going to tweak your reaction and make things easier in the long run, because you're kind of consistently looking for the silver lining. You're looking for things to be thankful about, and even the tough things. And this goes back to my upbringing in Bible situations. Even the tough things, you're thankful because you're working your way through it. You're either becoming stronger, or you're learning things about yourself you didn't know before by going through this extremely difficult situation. And you can look back and go, okay, that's what I learned, and I'm thankful for that because it got me to here. So I like the idea. I like his less kind of towards the end, his lesson of being grateful and being thankful about all the small things as well as big things. And I
Mhm.
think that's an important aspect of life.
I would have to not even add to that. I I think that there's something in that that's similar for myself. Question for you, just
Yeah,
a follow-up question. Is it the life-changing magic of tidying up, or is it spark? I think she wrote one after that. Spark, is it Spark
it's
Joy?
the life-changing magic of tidying up.
Okay.
It's the first one.
Yeah, the first
Life-changing
one.
magic of tidying
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
I had a really similar experience with that book, and I think that that's part of the reason why it's such a big seller. I was like, yeah, it's because it doesn't just deal with cleaning and tidying. It actually
It's
deals
so much
with,
more.
yeah, it deals with that very, very deep issue of letting go. Is how I looked
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah.
So that's beautiful. I'm glad that you kind of roped that into like his point, because that was my takeaway of what he was trying to say, and what his where he went with this too was that thing of gratitude.
Mhm.
um yeah. The point that I also thought was really intriguing or interesting along that note was it was that he kind of said was, sometimes it's not so much that I believe this, but it's I'm going through the action. And because of the action, belief is coming from that.
Yeah.
And I found that to be really interesting.
It's it falls into the common social thought of fake it till you make it. If you
Yeah.
keep doing the thing,
Yeah.
eventually you're going to get to where you want to go. It's
Yep.
making the conscious choice every day or every moment to, yes, I'm going to engage with this person and leave this person better than I found them, or at least leave them to be in a better place than we just experienced. I've done customer service for a long time. So you have those interactions with customers who are just angry, and you do whatever you can to, all right, what can I do to take the time, not just deal with anger,
Right.
but take time to be like, what's going on? How are you doing? Okay, what's happening? You seem angry, so why? Is it something I've done? Is there something else going on? I'm here to listen
Right.
for you if you want.
Right.
The campfire rule on a daily, moment by moment basis, leaving every moment better than you found it, which is
That
kind of a
takes
weird
I'm hearing you say
combination
that.
of faith and everything else, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing you say that, Keith, and there's something in that I'm cringing on, which is it's like, oh my gosh, that takes so much time and energy.
It does. Yeah,
It takes a lot of a lot. So
totally. And
yeah.
so that's a choice you make as well. It's like, am I going to invest my time on this? No, I'm not. It's a drive-through coffee place, and the person who's serving me coffee isn't in the best mood. Okay, that's fine. I move on. But there's also that aspect of like, well, that person is angry, and so I'm going to feed off of that anger, and I'm going to get upset. It all comes down to, I think, it all comes down to figuring out what you're going to invest your time. If these are choices that you're making on a day-to-day basis are good choices, even if you're just doing them by road, if they're getting you to a better place, then it's a beneficial thing. I think that's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, I get
I've not
I
had coffee
follow.
yet, so I have no idea.
No, I follow. I appreciate it. Yeah, this has been a good conversation. I'm trying to think if I have anything more to say to it other than I don't, but I do have gratitude. Like I'm really, really glad, Keith, that you, like I said, kind of approached this with that yes and attitude. I think that's really cool.
Very
Be-
improv.
yeah, very improv. Before we kind of totally wrap this up, is there anything else that I can't think of anything else that I want to add to this? Is there anything else that you want to add or any questions or any thoughts?
uh I don't think so. It,
Yeah.
it's it's a good book. It's a really intriguing and interesting take on what the Bible is, and I think it could be enjoyable to anyone. Like, I don't think you have to have a faith background to really get it. I think the way it's written is easy enough, and it's such an interesting journey that it's all right. I don't know anything about the Bible. Let me read this, and they'll still get enjoyment out of it
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
learn something, or and choose to either dive in more, or be like, yep, that was a good read. I'm done with it now. Let me move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very true to AJ Jacobs. I haven't read his other stuff, but it does make me intrigued because
Mm-hmm.
he has a whole, like you said, like I think the first book was reading the encyclopedia from beginning to end. I think he has a book on health where it's like, I think he follows a bunch of um, exercise routines or something like that. I haven't read it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
very much these experiential things that I feel like are very approachable. And this is, goes right along with that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I agree. I think almost anybody could read this and enjoy. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, cool. Well, we
I
will
think
have
I
to leave it.
also, I'm just realizing, sorry,
Yeah,
I'm just realizing that. So, do you know who Peter Greenaway is? The film director?
the film director Peter Green. What has he directed? I'm really bad with names.
The Cook, the Thief, the Wife and Lover is one book or one movie he did.
I haven't seen it.
A book with Ian McGregor.
Okay.
His style is very much a find it intriguing, which is probably part of what drew me to the book and draws me to being interested in the first book that he wrote, that AJ wrote about reading the
The encyclopedia.
encyclopedia. Style is it's very much, here's point A and I'm going to dive into this, and here's point B, and then here's point C and point D and point. So like he's very much a list person, which I'm realizing that there's a part of me that is definitely a list person, even though I don't write lists. So there's something about this book that I really enjoyed because of that. It's very, here's the first step, second step, third step, fourth step. Let me just keep going through all 12. Or here's to Z. Let me start with the Old Testament, go all the way to the New Testament. There's that completeness about it, which I appreciated.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. Yeah, it's not terribly. It's not terribly like some of my sentence structures where, woo.
Yeah.
Yeah. If anyone wants to know more about A.J. Jacobs, the author of The Year of Living Biblically, you can find him online at ajjacobs.com. You can find out a lot about all of the books that he's previously written, and as well as some that are coming up. Additionally, if you want to find out more information about myself, you can go to iampaulcram.com. There you can rent movies that I've worked on. You can see other podcast episodes. You'll find what I'm reading and what other books are coming up with my book club. And yeah, there you can even listen to some audio narrations from short stories that I've been working on. I appreciate everybody. Let's keep being kind. Thanks.